This is Earthling 6455463728. Do you read me? Over. This is Earthling 6455463728. Do you read me? Over. So a long time ago, I was a college student, and like many college students, I was poor. I dabbled in the stock market and I got burned badly. This is that story. I started trading because I knew a guy who had a brokerage account and it all seemed so easy. Of course, I didn't have a clue about choosing stocks. It was just like that episode of Friends, I think it was, and just like they probably did, I can't remember what happened. I lost all of that initial money, maybe $50, buying the cheapest stocks that I could find, hoping against hope and intelligence naturally that they would go from $1 to 25 or something crazy like that. But instead, they got lower and lower and lower. It was kind of strange actually. They got to less than a cent and kept going down. Basically those original companies folded, but I think there was money set aside to wrap up their affairs, and the stocks remained in my account until years and years later they disappeared at some fraction of a cent. After that initial investment failure though, I tried again, because like Jay-Z said in an interview with Warren Buffett, the genius thing that we did was we didn't give up. But, in my case, a better genius thing would probably have been giving up. I recall a friend of mine got access to a stock trading course, a manual from somewhere, and I went over it looking at stuff like double tops, when a stock price forms two peaks like a Bactrian camel, which was reputed to signal that the share price wasn't going any higher for the time being, or a double bottom, the reverse, which is supposed to mean it's not going to go any lower for the time being. Churning, which was when the price went up and down by small amounts very quickly and was a sign that the price was going to fall soon. Supports, which were points where the stock fell but not low enough to make a double bottom, etc. But it still meant that the stock was likely to keep going up. I used the info from the course for years. Sometimes it worked like a charm, and sometimes it didn't. The information was probably useful at some point, but when enough people know about something, it becomes useless, and maybe that's what happened. Please consider smashing like or dislike on my story. Thanks. Now, at the time, I didn't have any money to invest, but I had a plan. I was still pretty scared to try it, but one day, I very stupidly got a ticket for driving in the high occupancy vehicle or HOV lane past a motorcycle cop who was already giving someone else a ticket, presumably for the same thing. That same cop, funny enough, hardly gave me my ticket and again dashed off to catch someone else. The ticket was for $80, but for me it was 2 days' work, and the fact that I could lose that money so easily pushed me into taking the bigger risk of trying to execute my plan. My plan to get money to trade with was essentially to use 2 credit cards to borrow $5,000 at 0% interest. I would get a cash advance of $5,000 from one card and transfer the balance to another card that had 0% interest rate for a year. That 0% rate was a trick, by the way, so watch out. It didn't affect me because I didn't use the card for anything else except one other very small purchase. But it could have. So I put my plan into action, funded my account, and made a bunch of small non-fatal mistakes before eventually, over time, accidentally making a profit. For example, on one of the first or maybe the first serious trading day, I went in and out of a stock about 5 times, losing as I went, buying high and selling low. But at the end of it, weirdly enough, I actually felt that I had learned something and hadn't wasted too much money. Now it sounds simple, but I guess you could say it was agonizing at times. I would research companies to see if they were a good bet, and still my finger would hover over that buy button, and sometimes I would cancel the trade and do more research or forget about the stock altogether. But ultimately, this next try at trading worked out over the course of many, many trades. Naturally, I'm leaving out stuff like the fact that I would trade at my on-campus job during the day, and my boss's boss's boss would often see me doing it, and it annoyed him, but he never really liked me anyway. And I never got fired, so we can leave that aside. But if I'm giving any advice about those days, I would say try to have more self-control than I did. I suppose one major thing that I forgot to mention was that I was doing an MBA at the time. So, things like a company's financial reports and SWOT analysis weren't complete gibberish to me. I did a lot of my own research too, about PE ratios, ROI, cash flows, etc. So I knew a lot more about stocks than I did the first time. I probably made about $5,000 in profit. I'm trying to think what I spent it on, because I did take out all of my profit and spend it. One of those things must have been a laptop for my sister for a couple $1,000s, because I don't know how else I would have had that amount of money to buy that. Yes, laptops were a bit more expensive at the time. I think I might also have gone to a Disney theme park. Anyway, I wasn't exactly day trading. For example, I absolutely did not sell stocks at a loss. So I remember I must have been in one particular stock for months, waiting for it to go back up, and I finally sold it for the tiniest of profits before it went back down. On one spectacular day, I made $800 doing almost nothing. I set a programmed trade to buy a stock at a particular price, and bing, I got a message saying that I had bought the stock. So I programmed another trade to sell it at another price, and bing, it sold a few hours later, and I was $800 richer. That was a good day. As time passed though, the stock market instituted new day trading rules that prevented me from doing some of the things that had made me money. Also, some of the things that I did didn't work anymore, and I wasn't making much money at all. Eventually, I came to a crossroads. College was ending for me, and I was going to have to go back home without a penny, and it was going to be very difficult for me to trade. This was a while ago. Everywhere didn't have internet access for one thing. For another, I didn't have my own computer. I used the computers at my job, which was at the university's computer department. So I decided that I was going to make my big score. I would use the same method that I had previously, i.e., getting another cash advance so that now I would have $12,000. But instead of buying stock, I would trade in options. I had never traded in options seriously, and now I had a time limit of about a month to make these spectacular profits that I never made before. Otherwise, I would have to go back home without a dime. So I dove in, and all at once I made some familiar mistakes. Similar to what I mentioned above, I again went in and out of one particular stock quite a few times. Not over the course of a day, but probably over the course of several. The problem was that options are leveraged, whereas stocks generally are not. What that means is that in options, a relatively small movement in the price of a stock can allow you to make a lot larger gain than if you had spent the same amount of money buying that stock. That was the whole reason that I chose to trade in options this time. It also meant, though, that a relatively small change in the price of a stock can allow you to pretty much lose a lot or even all of your money, depending on certain conditions. I didn't lose all of my money. There's still about $130 left there to this day. But what would have been relatively small mistakes if I was trading stocks became stunning, spectacular, gut-wrenching losses for someone who didn't have any money in the bank or a job. My losses are tiny compared to some people, but for someone trading with a yearly income without a job, it was devastating. I lost more money than I had ever even seen in one place at a time, in huge swaths. One day, after looking at my losses, maybe $7,000 at the time, I went home and got in my bed and wondered if I would ever be able to sleep again. As we all know, that human feature usually still works, even when tragedy strikes, and it did then too. I kept trying, but obviously I failed to make back any of the money. I was the reverse of King Midas. I would have been better off coming up with a plan and then doing the opposite of that at every step. When I finally gave up, I had about 1% of the money that I had started with left, but I was still alive, so that was good. All the better to feel and continue to feel the pain of my loss. I asked my mom to buy me a ticket home because what was left wasn't enough to cover a ticket, and that was that. Eventually I got a job and paid back the credit card advance. It took me at least 6 months past the time when the 0% interest rate ran out. I wish I could say that I never lost any more money in the stock market again, but that was the worst time, emotionally. Naturally, I'm an idiot. Well, not exactly an idiot perhaps, but someone who should probably give up on anything to do with the stock market. I have, for the most part. What I would still like to do is to prove to myself that someone can still make money in the stock market. Not with real money though, but with a demo account. One of these days I plan to put aside the time to at least prove to myself that I know what it takes to be successful in the market. One of the sad things for me, aside from losing my money, is that the stock market is a zero-sum game, meaning that every cent that I lost went into the pockets of other people, and vice versa. That's kind of unfortunate, I think. But that's how life in general works, though. In business, every cent I make comes from someone else. It isn't always a loss for them, though, because they're supposed to be getting something back from me, but it does mean, for instance, that people can make more money if they pay their employees less or find a way to give their clients less for the same amount of money. So rounding out my story, ultimately I made some money in the stock market, but over time the rules changed, which made it harder to make money. Then I decided to start trading using tools I had little experience with, i.e. options, and gave myself unrealistic goals, which led to me losing 99% of my money. Sorry for saying I lost all when I didn't. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Maybe you all have similar horror stories or worse, which is why you clicked on my story. Comment and make me feel better, worse, or the same. Please consider smashing like or dislike, subscribe or comment, and share. Think about sharing it too. Peace.